Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto was chosen by Kushina Uzumaki and the Queens of Konoha, Part 4. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this in common foe next part. And now let's start the fanfic. So much time had passed since he began penetrating her that she thought she had most of his length within her. The pain still lingered, but now her body was writhing in ecstasy. Wanting to make a guesstimate of how much of his was still outside her, she slipped her hand between their bodies. Her eyes widened in fear. She was only halfway there. Kami, whispered Kushina in a low voice. Will you really be able to fit all of that in me, Sochikoi? I feel so full already, Databane. Naruto gritted his teeth from how forcefully his mother's cunt was squeezing him. You can fit it all, Kahime. The worst is over. Just drop your hips and push down. I'll take care of the rest. Kushina nodded hesitantly as she ignored the alarms blaring within her mind. It took a moment for her to gather her strength so she could brace herself. Staring deep into her son's eyes, she slammed herself down, taking 4 extra inches of him inside her extremely tight snatch. The bedroom shook with a ridiculously loud shriek as pain shot up from Kushina's through her womb, into her stomach, up through her throat. Her eyes bulged with tears straining her pretty face. A wave of feminine juices gushed from the depths of her cunt as she orgasmed unexpectedly. Naruto groaned as his mother creamed down on his. The discomfort he was previously in was overpowered by the feeling of her warm juices. While she continued squirting, he was treating her with medicinal chakra and preventing her from blanking out from the pain she was in. It took a minute, but she finally stopped shaking. Sometimes, he wished he didn't have such a terrifyingly huge. All the way, begged the mother. Push it all the way in. Cerulean blue orbs flickered in concern, but Naruto knew his mother wasn't going to stop until she had every inch of him inside her. He took a deep breath and wrapped his arms around her waist. Now that she had devoured a majority of his length, she was floating a few inches off his lap. Then, he slammed her down by her sides and the head of his monster violently crashed down the door of her cervix. Kaami-sama! Shrieked Kushina at the top of her lungs until her teeth began chattering and her legs started spasming. What were once violet orbs turned white as snow as her eyes rolled to the back of her head. Her knuckles turned pale, her fingers started to twitch, which would have given anyone the impression that she was scared stiff. Thanks to the medicinal chakra in her system, she wasn't experiencing any pain. However, every nerve ending in her body began tingling as wave after wave of fluids gushed like a tsunami. Tears once again rolled down her cheeks, but these tears were a result of her being lifted from the earth. Unbelievably powerful tremors ran through her legs, reaching all the way up her spine as she got struck down by jolts of pleasure. In her near paralyzed state, she had no idea that she was squirting for the second time. She shook and shook until she could shake no more. Kushina Uzumaki had just blacked out from the sheer power of her massive orgasm. Naruto smiled fondly at his unconscious mother and planted a few kisses all over her face. He was so proud of her for persevering through the pain and taking every inch of his inside her. Running a quick medical check on her, he was pleased to conclude that he hadn't damaged her uterus. Now that he was balls deep inside her, he could further work on her endurance. Huge tits bounced up and down as Minato's wife awoke with a thunderous gasp, but was quick to allow her breathing to level out. Opening her fluttering eyes, she smiled weakly at her son. I did it, Sochikoi. You sure did, Kahime, whispered Naruto as he ruffled up his mother's hair. Now all you need to do is adjust to my size. Just relax for now and wrap your legs around my waist. Then, I want you to rock your hips when I tell you. Okay. Kushina nodded as she placed her hands on her son's shoulders and let her big, juicy tits snuggle with his face. Long slender legs coiled around the small of his back as she fastened herself on his lap. The one-eyed beast within her was throbbing and she could feel it arguing with her womb. His hands were full of his mother's gorgeous bubble butt, he was being smothered by her huge S, and his was all the way up inside her. The smell of her hair and the sound of her sweet sighs as he slid his lips across her S, teasing the swollen nubs. It was all so overwhelming that Naruto felt like he was in heaven. Bringing one hand up, he grabbed one of her tits and began tweaking her while he ed the other. Only once he had his fill with her tits did he lean up and smash his lips against hers, drawing her in for a deep, sensual kiss. In the beginning it was a contest to see who could out-tease the other. Her tongue darted between his lips, but he countered that by running his tongue along hers. She tried sneakily slipping her tongue in his mouth. However, he had her beat by capturing her tongue gently between his teeth and ing on it. Due to his experience, he was able to land an easy victory over her. All she could do was whimper erotically as he shoved his tongue down her throat. Rock your hips, Kaheim. Despite being hopped up on pleasure, Minato's wife was able to hear her son loud and clear. Nodding cutely, she kept her lips puckered against his and tightly pressed her tits against his chest. She followed up by wrapping her arms around his neck, her wedding ring pressed into the back of his scalp. From there she went about working her hips back and forth. She started seeing two of everything as her cervical ring pulsed around his shaft. The movement was awkward initially, but Kushina gradually got a hang of the rhythm. Using her strong vaginal muscles, she began bumping and grinding. It was here that she truly understood the beauty of this position as their bodies rocked in unison like a slow, intricate dance. Her eyes watered due to the amount of love she could feel transferring from his mouth to hers as he engaged her in a gentle kiss. Her legs started cramping, but it was a good type of cramp. The painful stretching and expansion of her vaginal walls were thankfully over and done with. She sighed blissfully as he pulled away from her lips, only to latch onto her tits. A small giggle escaped her to see how eagerly he was ing her S, reminding her of when he used to la her when he was an infant. She affectionately kissed the top of his head as she went back to rocking back and forth, milking the humongous shaft that was responsible for turning this married woman into a real woman. This was lovemaking at its finest. A little string of saliva hung between their lips for just an instant, only to break and splatter against the Uzumaki matriarch's lips. Neither of them needed to inform each other of their impending climax. This position was so incredibly romantic that it was connecting them on a spiritual level. For what felt like ages, they kept floating together on their orgasmic cloud of incestuous love. Then, Kushina came with a vengeance, but this time her release was met with her son's own. Thick ropes of jism exploded inside her and with such quantity and intensity that she let out a deafening scream. Her eyes glossed while her mind went blank. All she could see was white as her son kept filling her up with so much hot semen that she felt like she was coming down with a fever. The blonde leisurely slid his out through the tender lining of his mother's gripping cunt. Thick globs of their combined fluids dribbled out of her, soiling the sheets below them. Gazing into her son's eyes, the redhead could see no lust, only genuine love. The joining of their bodies and soul was so much more intimate because of their bond as mother and son. I never imagined that it could feel this. I can't even find the correct word to describe it, sniffled Kushina as she caressed her son's face with so much love that her very touch melted him. You have shown me more love in this one round of than Minato has shown me in all the years he's known me. You've completely ruined me for your father, Sochikoi. Never let me go. Understand? I would rather die than see you back with him, answered Naruto in a confident voice. I stole you fair and square. Two-san will never get you back. I promise. A small nod was delivered by the redhead as she shared an affectionate kiss with the man she was cheating on her husband with. Separating his parents' outer labia, Naruto guided his into her groove for several wet swipes and then to the opening of her cunt. His fingers slid around in her juices as he prepared her for another deep penetration. It was kind of funny that just 18 years ago he came out of this, and now he was going back inside it after all these years. Squishy noises filled the bedroom since his was still slick with her juices, and her vaginal walls were still sticky and lubricated. The she let out now began extending into a sob of lewd satisfaction. With a few strokes, the soft tissue of her fully welcomed him back inside. Kushina started rising, her head now tilting downwards so she could cast a gaze down between their bodies to watch the separation as she lifted her torso off her son. She watched herself lifting and detaching from his monster, but a strand of juice from her cunt stay linked like a web to his. She could feel his shaft sliding solidly from within her until only the massive mushroom head was left trapped inside her. Then, she lowered her torso again onto him. "You feels so good, Kaheim," murmured Naruto as he massaged his mother's buttocks while pushing the final 2 inches of his inside her. "You feel like a dream come true," whispered Kushina with glossed eyes, her head spinning from getting stretched out so far and wide. Was she in love with this position? Yes. This was such an intimate position that she was repeatedly being thrown over the edge. However, was she a better lay than her best friend? Was Naruto finding her superior to Makoto's? She had so many questions, but she couldn't bear the thought of hearing something she didn't want to hear. After thinking it over, she decided to let her body convince him to leave Makoto and stay with her instead. "Here I come, Sochikoi." Without warning, the kunoichi began slamming herself up and down her son's monster. Her warm, married had a mighty grip on him and she could feel him throbbing deep within her. Her arms uncurled from his neck and she reached back and gripped the headboard, using it for leverage to thrust more fiercely at his delving. "Futs CCKK," cried Kushina. "So deeppp. Naruto's eyes widened as his mother rode him with such force that the bed bounced beneath them. The creaking of their mattress springs chimed in to join the musical melody of their grunts and s. Her arms were once again constricting his neck in a tight hold, her fingers yanking on his hair, her tits rubbing against him in a frenzy. Beautiful red hair shadowed her face, preventing him from seeing her features contorting in extreme pleasure. There was an urgency in her motion and he didn't have to spend much time figuring what was going through her head. "You want to get Ed now, Kaheim," growled Naruto as he made one powerful thrust, so powerful that it brought a screeching halt to his mother's motion, so powerful that it reduced her into a whimpering mess. Using this time wisely, he put a tight grip around her waist and slid down until he was laying back first with her straddling his lap. Now they were in the cowgirl position. "Then here we go." Lifting his legs, the blonde started ing the living shit out of his mother. Each thrust originated from the heart, from his very core. With every clap of his balls against her came a memory in a flashback. Her proud look when he was awarded Rookie of the Year. Her warm smile when he made her breakfast for the first time. The way she used to coddle him and shower him with love. Their enjoyable hangouts in the village and their ramen eating contests at Ichiraku Ramen. Every single memory he had with her was a happy one, and he planned to keep her happy for the rest of her life. She was too much woman for his tiny father. Kushina's head rocked back and forth, her eyes glossing and welling with tears from the sheer power of her son's thrusts. Years of UAL frustration were now boiling over and it was like her very soul was being ripped from her body. Her pore was throbbing in pain as it got jammed against his pubic hair each time he slammed her down on his. Her long hair swung around, waving back and forth like she was waving a white flag to surrender, but he would have none of that. Her s were pressing into his chest and all he could smell was the musky scent of their combined fluids soiling the sheets. Kushina Uzumaki came with a torrent of unheard of garbled words. But her son wasn't content with that orgasm. No, he kept obliterating her pore with his monster. She fell forward, unable to maintain the upright position in the height of release, but somehow folded her arms across his neck and rested her chin on his shoulder. It was like the world came crashing down on her as he kept drilling through her like he was trying to excavate a goldmine. Each of his thrusts stabbed her in places that were hitherto virgin to the touch of his father. Within less than 5 minutes, Kushina was once again panting like an exhausted dog, gasping out her breaths as a wave of UAL release started from somewhere around her orus and exploded throughout her body, reaching to her head and her toes. Her heart was pounding so wildly in her chest that she thought she was on the verge of a heart attack. She was in utter heaven, orgasmic pleasure lighting her entire body in a carnal inferno of ecstasy. She was now glistening with sweat, her jaw hanging low and her scratchy throat yearning for some water, but her son wouldn't let her take a breather. She was getting Ed so hard that her juices were squirting out around his and dripping down his thighs. Her was making wetting noises every time he pulled out of her, and again when he drove back in. Her huge tits were bouncing heatedly, her sweat-slicked red hair plastered across her cheeks. 1 hour into this, and her mind had surrendered all higher functions to her baser instincts. Her body was burning with UAL pleasure, propelling her into a realm where only she and her son existed. She kept slipping in and out of orgasm for what seemed like an eternity, her heart and soul being consumed with love and lust until the ecstasy of their incestuous passion rendered her insensible. Just as she arched her back, he shoved his thumb up her while jackhammering in and out of her abused. "Come in g," screamed Kushina with all her might, her mind overcome with immeasurable pleasure. It was hard enough seeing straight with her field of vision blackening with every passing second. But ultimately, everything faded to black. Kushina Uzumaki had officially gotten pounded into submission. XXX. Minato Namikaze looked up from his paperwork with utmost confusion plastered across his face. "What's wrong, Minato?" asked Jiraiya as he put down his research notebook. Since Naruto and Kushina were currently running like rabbits, he had no way of catching a sneak peek of the action due to the seals the blonde had set up inside their bedroom. Hence, he decided to imagine the incestual ing going on while rewinding with his former student in the Anbu headquarters. "It's nothing." Jiraiya just crossed his arms. "Then why the long face?" "I don't know what it is really," began Minato with a sigh. "I guess this has to do with Kushina-chan. I feel something off about her. Might it have to do with you being away nearly all year round?" pointed out Jiraiya, earning a glare from the blonde. "Hey, you asked and I answered. So, she seems different to you now." Minato nodded. "Yes, she seems more confident and happier than I've ever seen her." "And how is that a bad thing?" queried Jiraiya with an arched brow. Yeah, forget I mentioned it," said Minato as he waved at his former teacher. "I am away, a lot, but playing happy family is to be expected for a civilian, not a ninja. At least Sochi is always there for Kushina-chan. Of course, there was the whole matter of his wife and son acting too close for a mother and son. She was sitting on his lap while watching that movie last night. He tried vanishing the memory from his mind, but for some reason it kept gnawing at him. Then there was the fact he had jizzed his pants from watching Kushina Aili eat some fruit. She seemed so different today. Then again, there was the distinct possibility that he was just overthinking things. "You got that right. The Gaki is always there for her," replied the Toad Sage, but failing to mention that this statement was a double entendre. Glancing down at his notebook labeled, Project Uzumaki chest, he could only imagine the sort of roughing Naruto was giving his mother right now. "Oh, I almost forgot," continued Jiraiya while slapping 3 books on the desk. "You haven't received any of my recent Makeout Paradise installations, so here you go." Minato shook his head, not in the least bit surprised. Whenever his former teacher would publish a new book, he would get handed a copy, but would never read it. He did respect the man, but by Kami was he a perverted old fart. Glancing over at the 3 books, one stood out and his attention was captured from just the title alone. Makeout Paradise. A Cuckold's Diary. XXX. She couldn't tell what time it was, nor could she count the number of positions she got Ed in. The Uzumaki matriarch was currently floating in a pleasurable abyss. Her entire body was numb from all the pounding her son had given her. It wasn't just hardcore. No, the majority of their sessions consisted of deep, sensual lovemaking. His monster had fully broken in her. It was now her son's devoted follower. Naruto smiled fondly at his gorgeous mother and ran a hand through her wet, sweaty hair. Her lips were curled into a cute little smile of her own as she snuggled with him on their bed. An hour was given to her for resting purposes, but he spent 9 long hours having non-stop with her. She had woken up 10 minutes ago, and right now were holding each other, cherishing the intimacy. From her laying on her side, her underneath him, her on top, on the floor, there were a multitude of positions he had taken her in thus far. His mother had a first-class MILF and he just couldn't get enough of her. For the next 10 minutes or so, they kissed and cuddled, until Naruto felt it was time for him to be back inside the hole he came out from. Lifting her into a squat, he manhandled her until she was on her hands and knees. She bowed her head to the sheets, presenting her glorious to him like an offering. The whiskered adulted his lips, admiring the view. His mother's gorgeous bubble butt glistened in the light. Her cute little puckered up neatly between her cheeks, her dripping labia lips peeking out from between her thick thighs. Sochi-koi, can we please rest a little more? Begged Kushina as she looked over her shoulder. I am really sore, Databane. Just one more round, retorted Naruto with lustful eyes while placing his hands on his mother's plump hips. Then we'll call it a night, okay? Not waiting around for a response, he planted a soft kiss on her left cheek. Kushina threw her head back and sighed as her son smacked his lips against her doughy cheeks a second time. What were once innocent kisses now turned to hymning, and fondling her big, fat rear. He trailed his hands down, running them along the cups of her derriere, curving them around until the palm of his right hand was rubbing her. If that wasn't enough, the index finger of his left hand was buried all the way up to the knuckle within her sweet. Her huge tits swung back and forth as he stimulated both her entrances simultaneously. With a growl fit for a predator, he yanked his finger out of his mother's anus and proceeded to wedge his monster between her deep crack. Squishing her butt cheeks together, causing them to fit around his girth, he began rocking his hips back and forth, in the crevice of her the doughy cheeks slapped against his abs, producing loud clapping noises. Are you ready to take it doggy style, Kaheim? Asked Naruto as he put an end to his ministrations. Hi, replied the cute, flushed Uzumaki matriarch. To her, this was a really naughty position. It was named after an animal for Kami's sake. Nevertheless, being on all fours, exposing her backside to her beloved son felt incredibly arousing. Chuckling, the blonde spread his mother's butt cheeks, while instructing her to pull her labia lips apart between 2 fingers. His head brushed against the puffy lips of her cunt, but then he decided to drive past her entrance until he was smooching the cute little folds of her puckered anus. The room boomed with warm laughter as his mother tried clenching her as tight as she could. Don't worry, Kaheim, said Naruto as he caressed his mom's wide, round hips. I'm not going to you in the just yet. For now, keep your legs spread for me. Kushina nodded shyly with an atomic blush coloring her radiant features. No matter how addicting it was having with her son, it was not feasible for him to take her anal virginity right now. Getting vaginally penetrated brought her pain the likes of no other. How would it feel if he were to shove his monster up her extremely small? Cringing at the mere thought, she absently wondered how he planned to train her. Snapping back to attention, she took a deep breath and braced herself. Without another word, Naruto began forcing his inside his mother's tight cunt with a series of hip thrusts. Kushina cried out as her son rammed her straight in the cervix, causing her gush out her juices as her was still extremely sensitive from all those hours of digging her fingernails into the sheets. She tore through the fabric while tremors ran through her thick, matronly thighs. Driven by pure lust, she grinded against his pelvis, determined to bring him to an orgasm as well. Ripples ran through her magnificent cheeks as he slammed her from behind. She rolled her childbearing hips, her cunt muscles acting out in desperation to trap him inside her forever. The rhythm was slow and sensual, but she found herself struggling to hold herself up due to her shaking arms. Kami, we look so hot together, thought Kushina as she glanced over at the mirror that was attached to their dresser. This angle was giving her a clear view of her huge tits swaying as her son pounded her from behind. She wiggled her perfect hips and began rocking back into his thrusts, driving him deeper inside her. For the next 30 minutes, her son gave it to her nice and slow, long and deep. His hand would occasionally reach around until he was rubbing her while she bucked her childbearing hips. At other times, he would lean forward over her back and slide his hands under her to massage her massive, hanging tits. She even caught him burying his face in her neck, planting kisses on the creamy skin of her neck. Initially, she was in love with how romantic he was being with her. She even had a handful of orgasms and had soaked the sheets, her thighs, his chest, his balls. Squirting orgasms were awesome. The more she stared at the mirror to analyze their copulation, the more she realized just how much her features were being highlighted. Her huge tits were hanging below her, begging to be squeezed, and he answered their prayers. Her was being presented to him like an offering. Honestly, she found it strange for him to be taking her so gently. After all, she had seen Naruto-ing Makoto like an animal in this position and her obediently taking the pounding. Slow and steady wins the race, but sadly Minato's wife wasn't in the mood for a sensual round of lovemaking right now. All those hours of vanilla had fulfilled her heart's desire. However, there was a deep itch in her cunt and it could only be scratched with a brutal pounding. She was craving for him to go all out on her like he had done when she was riding him in the cowgirl position. Little did she know, her son felt the same way. Do you want me to you, Kaheim? Cooed Naruto while spanking his mother's round, plump butt cheeks, earning a squeal from her. Or do you want us to keep making love? Kushina cutely lowered her head, her face burning red from the thought of her son giving it to her rough. Me. What? Growled Naruto, spanking his mother's noggin, this time with both hands. Speak up, Kaheim. He spanked her a third time, harshly this time, making her sob in pleasure and pain. Tell me what you want. Me, shrieked Minato's wife. Me, Sochikoi. Very well, was all the warning Naruto gave his beloved parent as he withdrew 7 inches of his from her before plunging every inch back inside her in one fell swoop. Kushina's head rocked up, her eyes bulging out from the sheer power of his thrust. The kitty gloves were off and she being lifted off the sheets each time he rammed her from behind. A surge of pain coursed through her as he began ing her so hard that she felt he was splitting her in two. His fingers dug deep into her hips to the point she knew he was leaving marks. Stars appeared in her field of vision as he slapped her shaking cheeks, making her cry from the stinging sensation. If only the villagers could see their precious lady Kushina now. All through her childhood, she was renowned for her tomboyish attitude. Those who made fun of her hair always left with bruises. Not even her husband could boss her around. However, she was a natural submissive to her son. Naruto was the only person in existence who could dominate and own her like this. But this was what she wanted. She wanted him to not hold anything back. If she was going to steal him from her best friend, she had to ensure that she could handle him better than Makoto ever could. His huge balls slapped off her throbbing cunt as he kept punching her deepest reaches. Powerful vibrations were running through her thighs, but she kept bucking her hips back and forth, meeting his thrusts. She felt him clutching a fistful of her hair and twirling it around his hand. Then, he began yanking on it, tugging her head back, and she was stunned into silence. Realizing she stood no chance against her son, she surrendered herself to him, allowing him to have his way with her. A jolt of lightning struck her nerve endings as a pressure began building deep within her. First, her began tingling. Then the sensation spread to the rest of her body. Even her mind was tingling. Her son kept hammering away at her like until her vaginal walls came crashing down. See come in, whimpered Minato's wife like a scalded dog, which was fitting since she had just gotten wrecked in the doggy-style position. Thick, rich cream took a joyride down her sacred tunnel, drowning the massive intruder buried all the way up to the hilt within her core. Her eyes slowly fogged up as she fell forward, her beautiful face landing on the pillow that was placed underneath her. Tears were trickling down her cheeks as overwhelming waves of pleasure swept through her. Naruto resisted his urge to ejaculate inside his mother, but found that increasingly difficult since her was squeezing him for dear life. Her face was burrowed into her pillow as she was ing like a ghost. Each of his jackhammering thrusts resulted in her juices squirting out. Wanting to make an amendment to the position, he rocked his hips hard, forcing the air out of her lungs. Her knees fully gave in and he smoothly straddled her thighs while remaining balls deep inside her. Once again, Naruto was yanking on his mother's hair while pounding her like he was trying to break it. Kushina screamed and wailed with a perfect, "I'm being Ed stupid" look on her face, but was instinctively bucking her hips back into him. With one hand, he slapped her across her jiggling butt cheeks. By now he could see his fingers outlined on her formerly creamy skin. A dark smirk curled to his lips from just imagining his father's reaction to seeing his wife get Ed into oblivion by their son. It was nearing the point where the blonde couldn't stop his impending orgasm, so he wanted to finish this round of with a bang. Channeling chakra to his kneecaps, he threw caution to the wind and embraced his inner beast, the destroyer of prostitutes. A growl escaped him, his eyes flashing dark dominance. Painful thrusts were being delivered and his mother began screaming at the top of her lungs. He could hear her crying, begging him to stop ing her, but he refused to give in. Her head reared back, her eyes staring up at the ceiling, but she could see nothing as she got her mind, body and soul broken by her son as he took her like in heat. The blonde mother lover had unleashed all hell upon his mother. Cerulean blue orbs narrowed as Naruto studied the way his beautiful parents was clenching and unclenching in response to his every thrust. Taking this as an invitation, he shoved 2 fingers up her and followed it up by rocking his hips as hard as he could. The whole bedroom shook. CCC coming GGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGGG broke the dresser mirror. Shards of glass came crashing down on the dresser as Minato's wife went off like a rocket. Foaming at the mouth, drool leaked copiously from the corners of her mouth. She could barely breathe as her blood caught fire in their incestuous lust, her orgasm cleansing her of any guilt she may have had for cheating on her husband. It was like she was being reborn, now and forever becoming her son's lover. She was not being ed by a man. She was being ed by a god. The entire room was now reeking of, but he kept going, kept ing his mother like the animal this position was named after. It surprised him that even though she was barely conscious that she was trying to buck her hips back and forth. He worked the 2 fingers within her butthole, exploring her anal walls while keeping a good, hard thrust pattern. Yanking his fingers out, he went all out on her poor, sensitive. If he was going to orgasm, then he wanted his mother to join in on the action. And by Kami did she come. First, her legs began pushing up at him, her entire body stiffening with each excruciating deep thrust. Her arms straightened out as her fingers twitched. Her head was mushed against her pillow, but her eyes were rolled into the back of her head, and only the whites of her eyes were visible. Her mouth opened wide, but no words came out. Only the barely audible noise of strained, pained pleasure escaped her throat. Her entire body was shaking as all her muscles were tensed, the hardcore becoming too much for even a veteran kunoichi like her to handle. Her was clenched. The tiny little button winked at her son as he was battering her like a demon possessed. Her back arched, and with that she began thrashing around, her legs kicking into the air. Kushina Uzumaki came, but with the mother of all orgasms. A geyser of feminine juices gushed from the depths of her cunt like a volcanic eruption. With each thrust, her fluids came shooting out of her abused, dancing artfully into the air for just a moment before raining down on her, splashing against both their thighs, calves, feet, but most of the release took refuge on the soiled sheets beneath them. This was why a pervert of Jiraiya's level called him the blonde mother lover. It was because Naruto had a soft spot in his heart for married women and mothers. To him, the body of a mature woman outclassed the girls of his generation in every way. He just made his mother show her full potential as a MILF by drawing out her ultimate orgasm, an orgasm that was still ongoing. The convulsions of her vagina were so strong that the blonde found it impossible to resist the urge to explode inside her. It was finally time. "I'm coming, Ka-Heim," roared Naruto as thick, creamy bands of jism fired from his head and went spearing through her, painting the walls of her. Searing waves of pleasure overloaded his mind, scattering his brain cells as his knees gave in. Another jet of baby batter rocketed, then another, until he was unleashing all hell inside her. This was one of his biggest orgasms to date. As hot, reproductive cream filled her womb, the Uzumaki matriarch was swept away in an explosion of complete ecstasy. She was still creaming while this was going on, so this stimulation was beyond her wildest imagination. Her loins were on fire and she felt like she was dying from pleasure. It was only because she was channeling chakra to her nervous system that she was conscious right now. Her eyes were wide and her mouth was still open, but she just couldn't find the strength to speak, think, or even see straight. Her son said he was going to the living shit out of her, and by Kami he kept his word. She was no, but she couldn't bear the thought of being deprived her son's monster. The pleasure he had given her was so monumental that she could no longer live without him. Thinking about going back to Minato made her want to claw her eyes out. That man no longer deserved to touch her. Sure, she was in the wrong for cheating on him, but that marriage ship had sailed for good. She now belonged to Naruto Uzumaki, the man who had conquered the red-hot habanero. Perhaps she was wrong to have thought the red string of fate tied her and her husband together. Maybe her husband's role in all this was just to aid her in giving birth to her true soulmate, her greatest love. She was destined to be together with a blonde-haired man, but that man wasn't her husband, it was her son. Unable to handle such ungodly pleasure, she murmured her son's name devotedly as her completely defeated body slowly went limp. He fell on top of her, his lips crashing down on the sides of her face, but she was none the wiser since she had gotten her brains ed out. With her violet orbs squeezed shut, the powerful kunoichi drifted off into the realm of nothingness. This was the 12th time he made his mother pass out. And he was just getting started with her. Withdrawing his monster from his mother's tight little, he sank into a squat and propped her hips up. It was a sight to behold. Him on his knees, his gorgeous parents raised high, her cheeks spread. The puffy, swollen labia lips were still a little distant as he had really stretched out her cunt. Her cute little puckered anus was winking at him, as though it was trying to lure him into ing her, and the creamy juices were oozing out of her, making a mess of their already drenched bedsheets. He just loved ending things with a nice, rich cream pie. The headboard was now detached from the bed and was leaning against the dented wall. Naruto had been ing his mother so hard that neither she nor the furniture were strong enough to endure it. The bottom right leg of the frame was also destroyed, so the bed was basically leaning down, ready to snap. Words fail to describe how soiled the sheets were. No amount of laundry detergent was going to wash this shit out. Even the mattress was lumpy and worn out. The phrase, breaking in the bed, never seemed more appropriate. They say incest is the best. The blonde mother-lover had put his mother to the test. When people hear of a cage, they picture the strongest ninja of a hidden village. They were thought to be men of greatness whose names will forever be etched into history books. Unfortunately, the glamour associated with the title was in name only. Their day-to-day task was so mediocre that even a civilian could be trained to do it with no hassle. After all, signing paperwork didn't exactly scream powerful ninja. Speaking of leaders who hate paperwork, Minato sat in his chair with a frown marring his face. Rather than being cooped up in the Anbu headquarters for one day, he was now assigned to reviewing thousands of documents, all requiring his immediate decision. It would take him at least 8 days to finish doing all this paperwork. That trip to grass country had messed everything up for him. Cringing at the pain his right hand was in, the blonde decided to take a small break to avoid the possibility of him getting carpal tunnel syndrome. His attention was once again diverted to the books Jiraiya had left for him. Not once in all his years had he taken a sneak peek inside the Makeout Paradise novels, but for some reason he was transfixed with a cuckold's diary. The graphic artwork illustrated and shadowed image of a man and woman in bed with a third person on the floor in the fetal position. A little peek won't hurt anyone, muttered Minato under his breath, trying to justify his actions. The past week has been unbearable for him with how horny he's been. Warning. Netarare is not for the average reader, as its intent is to cause an emotion of deep jealousy or distress. Do not proceed further if you're uncomfortable with the idea of your partner cheating on you. Minato knew he should have closed the book there, but he flipped the page anyway. I married young, and to a breathtakingly beautiful woman. Obviously, I won't tell you her real name, so let's just call her Amy. It was love at first sight. Her cascading brown locks, her sweet hazel eyes, her perfect smile, I just couldn't look away from her. After working up the courage to ask her out on a date, we found that we were perfect for each other. That one date turned to several. Months later, I decided to pop the question. Everyone in the neighborhood heard my cries of delight when she agreed to marry me. She was the apple of my eye, the light to my dark, she was my life. The problem was that I couldn't keep her satisfied in the bedroom. Not once did she hold that against me, but it was clear as day that my small was not giving her the pleasure she deserved. I started looking into supplements and even spoke with a doctor who specialized in medicinal ninjutsu. Unfortunately, there was no treatment available that could enlarge my. Then, I got an epiphany. If I can't pleasure my wife, why don't I bring another man to take my place? I loved Amy-chan so much that I wanted to see her happy, even if I wasn't the one bringing her that happiness. The prologue was sweet in the beginning, but the underlining dark theme had Minato's interest piqued. He was already feeling sympathy towards the tiny Ed protagonist. Then again, this had to do with him sharing the fictional character's plight of having a below-average sized reproductive organ. I was stupid, but my intentions were pure. All I wanted to do was provide her with the pleasure that I was never able to give her. Despite wanting this for my wife's sake, I started feeling aroused from imagining another man laying with my wife. I wish I could turn back time and not have brought this up to her. I wish I had never pestered her about it. She was furious to hear my request at first. However, 3 years later, she finally agreed to sleep with another man, but only if I was there as well. After laying out our terms and conditions, we agreed that this would be a one-time thing, and that we would wipe the memory from our minds. Then, in came the man we had scoped out. Unlike me, he was tall, muscular and had such a giant that it was technically wrong to call it a. That man, he had a monster. I felt so inferior to him. For reasons he couldn't explain, a vision of his son training outside their home came to him in a flashback. Perhaps it had something to do with the protagonist in the novel feeling inferior to the man about to pummel his wife. Minato had never felt jealous in his life because he was what girls used to call a pretty boy. Due to him being Hokage, there was nothing he really had to fear. It was only recently when he saw his wife sitting on their son's lap that he felt a pang of jealousy. He was by no means a homo, but he couldn't deny how superior his son was to him in terms of physique. If he was being honest with himself, it was a little overwhelming to be in the younger man's presence. Naruto just exerted a dominant aura. I'm begging you. Please pull out of my wife, Ruto-san. You're killing her. I can still hear myself crying, begging for that man we brought into our bedroom to stop stretching out my wife. I could still see Amy crying like a hysterical fangirl. He was stabbing her in places that I could never reach with my micro, yet he still had more than half his length to stuff her with. Ah, no more. No mooree. Too big. Stop. Not even during childbirth had I seen my wife in so much pain. That heartache turned to heartbreak when my wife stopped crying in pain and started wailing in pleasure. Tears were flowing down her face and fluid splashed out of her. I instantly sank to my knees, clutching my heart. It was a secret fantasy of mine to see my wife with another man, but not to see her squirt like an excited whore. Not once in our marriage had she orgasmed so hard. Come in GGGG. This was a life-changing experience for Amy. I knew it, she knew it, even the man she was cheating on me with knew it. That ecstasy in her eyes was enough to show me that she was undergoing pleasure beyond her wildest imagination. Come in GGGGGGGGGGGGG. That's it. Ruto just kept obliterating my wife with his powerful thrusts. Take it all, Amy-chan. Ah Kami. I began sobbing her name. Seeing that, Ed stupid, look on her face was like getting stabbed in the heart. With trembling lips, I muttered a prayer to Kami-sama, praying to any god listening for my wife to return to me. I never wanted to share her again. Then, Amy did something that went against the terms and conditions we had set up for this event. She began kissing the man we brought into our bedroom. For 8 long hours I was forced to watch as that fiend kept breaking my wife, making her come over and over. To my horror, my was getting hard, harder than it's ever been. The man finally pulled out of my wife and I whimpered to see how brutally he had stretched her out. The small slit of her vagina was now a gaping hole. Her eyes were fluttering, her stomach swelled as he kept unleashing his seed into her womb. That man had owned my wife and I could do nothing about it. You are my god, Ruto-sama. Hearing my wife say that made me want to crawl in a hole and die. Minato closed the book and threw it in his drawer. He wasn't even 1/10 of the way through with the novel, but he wasn't willing to entertain the idea of reading any more. His breathing was labored and he was sweating profusely. Even his eyes were watering from just imagining himself in the protagonist's position. He should have just listened to the warning detailed at the start of the book. What he didn't know was that this book was based on a true story. The man was Baku Akio, a carpenter born and raised in Iwagakure. The wife's name was Rei Fumio, an Iowa kunoichi who later retired and scored herself a job as a columnist. Jiraiya hadn't been creative with the name Ruto, but it didn't matter. This incident happened right before Naruto gave up ing prostitutes. Jiraiya had taken him to a new whorehouse near the land of Iwagakure. They had to be extremely careful in this mansion. People from Iowa hated Naruto because of his father's actions in the Third Ninja War. So, to deal with this unjustified hatred, he decided to ruin the wife of a Iowa native for her husband. That unfortunate victim was Rei. While Naruto was ruining Rei for her husband, Jiraiya was in his invisibility cloak, furiously scribbling in his notebook. The Toad Sage also had a shadow clone on standby who was videotaping the reaction of Baku. This was what gave birth to Make Out Paradise, a cuckold's diary. XXX. Naruto Uzumaki was confused. Standing outside the bedroom he stole from under his father's nose, the whiskered adult waited for his mother to give him a signal to come inside. Kushina had requested for him to give her an hour of prep time because she had something special in store for him. They've been having non-stop for the past 4 days now. To his delight, he heard her melodious voice calling for him. Entering the master bedroom, he drank in the warm, romantic aroma garnered through the magenta candles placed on the nightstand on either side of the bed. Speaking of bed, it was a brand spanking new king-sized frame with a triple-loaded foam mattress. Seeing as Naruto had literally broken in his parents' previous bed, it made sense for him to purchase a new one. He even installed a new mirror onto the dresser since his mother had shattered the previous one with her painfully loud screaming. Then he saw her. His red-haired goddess. She stood before him garbed in a full-length robe, but she was such a voluptuous MILF that it barely hid her mouthwatering femininity. When he lowered his gaze, feeling a little disheartened not being able to catch a glimpse of her long, slender legs, he saw she had on a pair of white high heels that were littered with diamonds. He didn't need to see a price tag to know these were one inexpensive pair of shoes. Shutting the door behind him, he took a few steps forward, only for her to raise up a hand. I got married a little over 2 decades ago, but you've made me happier than I've felt over the course of my marriage, began Kushina, her voice soft and gentle. You've made me happier than I've ever been in my life. Having said that, I would like for you join me in my quest to travel back in time. I want you to imagine that this is my wedding night. The redhead untied her robe and shrugged it off her shoulders, revealing her glorious body clad in a white silky bra with lace trim. A hardening amount of cleavage was being shown as his mother's huge tits were pretty much popping out of her undergarment. He shamelessly lowered his gaze, watching as her taut tummy came into view, her little belly button drawing him in. Those hips of hers, those nice, full, motherly hips. Oh, how he was yearning to caress them again. His cerulean blue orbs sparkled with lust as his mother's thick, matronly thighs came into view. A gasp escaped him, his breath taken away. Clasped around her waist was a beautiful garter belt. Creamy white was its color, but rose petals decorated the garment. 6 fluffy straps attached to the belt held up her white sheer stockings, which did nothing but magnify her appeal. He swallowed a lump in his throat, mesmerized by how well the color of her undergarment was accentuating her gorgeous red tresses. For reasons unknown, the sight of her finger twirling around her stockings brought his gaze up to her face. He then realized he was just craving to stare deep into her violet eyes, wanting her to know just how much he was enthralled by her. Directing a smile at her, and receiving hers in response, he lowered his gaze back down her voluptuous body. Between her delicious thighs was a white pair of panties, which he planned to yank down as soon as possible. This is my bridal lingerie, said Kushina, her voice full of emotion. It's been 22 years since I last put them on, but I believe now is the right time to wear them again. Words died down Naruto's throat when he realized the importance of these clothes. His mother was donning the same matrimonial undergarments that she wore on her wedding night when she gave her virginity to his father. She was wearing them again, after all these years, not for Minato, but for him. By doing this, she's made it clear that she's picturing herself married to him and that they were about to have their wedding night. No words could describe what he was feeling. He was silent as he approached his mother, and she just as silently took a step forward. Placing his hands around her childbearing hips, he lowered his face, his lips a few inches from her own. I love you, Kahime, was all Naruto said as he captured his parents' lips with his, their mouths opening and meeting in perfect harmony. This kiss was unlike all the others they've shared thus far. It was like a million bursts of light went off around her when she felt her son's lips brush against hers. Tiny spasms seized her muscles for just a moment as the intense surge of their kiss crippled her entire body. This kiss was different because he was channeling it straight from his very core. She could feel his every emotion, his every desire as he pecked her lips repeatedly. Kushina tried her best to proclaim her love for him as well, but he wasn't giving her a chance to return those 3 magical words. A shiver ran down her spine as he stroked her face with the backs of his fingers, his lips sinking deeper against hers. Her body locked up and she was unable to keep her eyes open due to the sheer passion of their union. His strong, masculine scent filled her nostrils, sending her on a trip down memory lane to recall when she snuggled with him in bed for the first time. Honestly, it was like they were sharing their first kiss all over again. So raw, so passionate, so soft, yet so heavy. Turning her neck, she allowed them to indulge in a deeper, more intimate kiss. He was one step ahead of her as he pulled her even closer towards him, his tongue beseeching hers for an affectionate caress. She panted into his mouth, her fingernails digging into the back of his head. Slowly, their kiss turned fiercer. His tongue thrashed around from top to bottom, ing her inner cheeks and teeth before drawing in her lower lip in growing passion, lust, love. Frankly, she was struggling to stay upright because he was making her knees go weak. She buckled beneath his eagerness, thick juices oozing from her saturated labia lips. An erotic whimper escaped her like a thief in the night as she felt his teeth sink into the creamy skin of her neck. She wiggled her big, fat, as his teeth sank deeper, hungrily licking her skin. It was like he was smothering her with his proclamation of love again, but this time letting his body do the talking. I love you, Sochikoi, whispered Kushina with tears welling in her eyes, her heart racing a million miles per second. She was so taken back by the emotional kiss that she couldn't help but start sobbing. Naruto just smiled at his mother and brushed away her tears. Please tell me, sniffled the MILF. Is there even an end to your love for me? They say silence is golden, but Naruto had to break it. No, there isn't. This didn't mean Sasuke's mother meant less to him than Kushina. There was no scale big enough to quantify his love for Makoto. She was his black-haired goddess, and no one in this universe or the next could replace her. However, it wouldn't be fair to Kushina if he was comparing her to Makoto all the time. His approach on treating them equally was by not thinking of one while being intimate with the other. Of course, he knew this was wishful thinking because such a thing was easier said than done. Meanwhile, Kushina felt like she had died and gone to heaven. It was every girl's dream to be with a man who loved her the way her son loved her. Oh, Minato wasn't worth a rat's to her now. When she gave her vows 22 years ago, she thought she was marrying the man who would make her the happiest woman on the planet. When she wore her bridal lingerie on her wedding night, she thought she would be in for the best night of her life. She was so gullible, so naive. It took her 22 long years to understand how it actually feels to be a bride. I can't offer you my virginity, because your father took it all those years ago, said Kushina with a surge of sadness coursing through her. She had sent out several shadow clones to skim through medical journals, but nowhere did she come across anything that could allow her to restore her hymen. Not necessarily, interrupted Naruto as he gently massaged his mother's derriere. When we first had, it felt like I was taking your virginity. A cute red hue etched across the kunoichi's features. That's only because you're so huge, Databane, whispered the embarrassed woman. Anyway, there's a reason why I wore my bridal lingerie. Pausing here, she took her son's hands and interlocked them with hers. Sochikoi, I wish to offer you, my other virginity. His mother was offering him her just under 2 weeks since they became a couple. This had him flabbergasted because he didn't start having anal with Makoto until 5 years into their relationship. A soft sigh escaped him from thinking about his gorgeous black-haired goddess. She was giving him the necessary time to handle things with his mother, even though she was incredibly lonely without him. Snapping out of his thoughts, he gestured for her to turn around, and she wasted little time in obeying his command. The fabric of her white panties was being stretched due to her glorious bottom. An outline of a circular disc was visible through the sheer lace undergarment, earning a grin from him and a blush from her. Hooking his thumbs under the waistband of her panties, he peeled them down, causing ripples to run through her doughy cheeks as her big, juicy popped out. He reveled in the sight of the butt plug she had lunged inside her. It was small plug with a diamond gem on the end, and he was using this to train her like he had trained Sasuke's mother. He had forced her to keep this toy inside her at all times. That is, unless she had to go to the bathroom. 2 days ago, his mother made her first attempt to walk with the butt plug shoved inside her. Kushina had almost tripped over her heels and Naruto was sent into a laughing fit. She didn't have the confidence to take full strides, fearing the plug might fall out, or worse, it could move and do some internal damage to her. The reason for him doing this was not to be mean to her. For her to accommodate his monster, he needed to stretch her out and this was the best way to do it. Pressing his fingers against the plug, he pushed it deeper inside her and began moving it in a circular motion. While doing this, he brought a hand to her erect and pinched it between 2 fingers. He would rub her in 5, maybe 6, leisurely circles and then push 2 fingers into her. It was a rhythm that she was most responsive to. The jolt of pleasure made her clench her anus, creating a firm grip around the butt plug. Edging a finger each side of the plug, he pulled gently, ballooning the skin around her back door. Keep your cheeks spread nice and wide for me, instructed Naruto as he pulled the plug further, bulging his mother's. Kushina whimpered as her son pushed back the anal plug and it twirled around inside her. Lowering her hands to her hips, she dug her fingers deep into her skin, spreading her bottom for him. For the next 2 minutes he kept using the instrument to stimulate her before finally pulling it out. Her anus spread as it grew around the slowly exiting toy, her sphincter gradually retracting but staying a little open. The room was met with a loud as thick, creamy juices started dripping from her cunt. Kaheim, continued Naruto as he stood up and drew his mother into his embrace. I can't express how happy I am that you're offering your virgin to me, but unfortunately you aren't ready to take me up there just yet. Although this news did put a damper on the redhead's mood, she wasn't all that surprised to hear this. Truth be told, she was scared with the prospect of him taking her anal virginity because of his ridiculously mammoth-sized. He could easily split her in two and cause serious damage. However, this was her way of preventing him from going back to her best friend. She recalled Makoto being able to take Naruto up the and she felt inclined to do the same. Once he takes her tiniest hole and makes it his personal plaything, he would have no valid reason to chase after anyone else. Why would he even need another woman when she's offering him her mind, body and soul? A wild look was in his eyes as he unsealed a new butt plug and presented it to his mother. You aren't ready yet, but that just means I have to up your training. Chewing on her bottom lip, the Uzumaki matriarch gazed at the toy and found it thicker and lengthier than the previous one. Then again, this was a key component in preparing for the impending anal. Closing her eyes, she spread her butt cheeks further and he wasted no time in stuffing it within her. She exhaled deeply as her sphincter began to loosen to accommodate the toy. It was giving her a tough time, but she gritted her teeth and whimpered through the pain until she felt the widest part of the plug sliding past the ring into her. Okay, it's all the way in, whispered Naruto, barely able to contain himself. His mother was on her knees, clad in her bridal lingerie with a butt plug lunged fully into her. Oh, how his father had missed out. Aligning his monster with her rich, pink labia lips, he began brushing them with his head. Do you want me to stuff your with my, Kaheim? Oh, Kami yes, purred Kushina, showing a glimpse into the transformation she's gone through since she got together with her offspring. Her voice was rich and seductive, fit for the goddess she was. A few weeks ago she wouldn't have had the confidence to say something like this. Wiggling her perfect, commodious hips, she invited him to have his way with her. Half-lidded were her violet orbs, both in pleasure from the toy shoved up her butt and from the prospect of getting ed by her son. A fire ignited from deep within his core as he rocked his hips forward, forcing all 14.5 inches of his monster up her in one go. Kushina shrieked at the top of her lungs, her entire body undergoing tremors as she unexpectedly squirted enough juices to drown a man. Creamy nectar ran down her thighs, her producing squishy noises every time he rocked his hips into hers. The clenching of her anus made her walls constrict the butt plug, doubling the pleasure for her since she was getting stimulated in both holes. The master bedroom was once again full of the red-hot habanero's cries. XXX. While his son was doing his wife, Minato was cooped up inside the Anbu headquarters doing his paperwork. His fingers curled as he flicked his wrist in pain, wishing for these dreaded documents to magically disappear off the face of the earth. He's been at this for so long that he could barely keep his eyes open. Thanked Kami for the invention of chakra pills. Minato-sensei. Minato snapped his head up to see Kakashi Hatake, his old student, entering his temporary office. It's been 3 years since the masked shinobi rejoined the Anbu Black Ops. The job of teaching Naruto was complete once the blonde made Chunin, so there was no need for him to remain a Junin sensei. Of course, Kakashi had only rejoined the forces so he could cash in that sweet S-rank pension money after 2 more years of serving. Smiling at the lazy bastard, he offered him a seat. What's up, Kakashi? Asked the Hokage. Nice office, huh? Kakashi chuckled as he took a seat. It sure was a surprise when I went to the Hokage Tower, only to find that there were renovations going on. Saying this, he straightened up a little. The reason why I'm here is because I sensed 2 chakra signatures from inside your office. However, I was unable to gather a reading because something was distorting the chakra. I couldn't even enter your office because it was locked with a seal. That does sound strange, replied Minato with a hand on his chin. The construction workers have been working late into the evening, but at no point was the door to be locked. Then again, the back of the door did need some work, so maybe they must have closed it, which would have activated the lock. I don't really think this should be an issue because every sensitive document in the office got sealed into scrolls, which are now in my possession. A long pause was given before Kakashi nodded his head. Okay, now that adds up with Itachi had told me. Maybe I was just overthinking things. Minato laughed a little at his old student. Well, if Itachi told you not to worry about it, then you shouldn't have worried in the first place. You know he's one of the most loyal shinobi in the village. Naruto had ensured that no one would find out about his UAL adventures with his mother. He had appointed Itachi to become the Anbu in charge of the Hokage office renovations, meaning he could come and go inside the office as he pleased. Everyone would report to Itachi, who would then report to him. Minato would be kept in the dark as would every other higher up in the village. Smiling at his former teacher, Kakashi couldn't help but agree with the man. Having been Itachi's supervisor in Anbu, he knew the young man was loyal to a fault. What he and the Hokage didn't know was where that loyalty actually lied. There was a sinking feeling in his gut that something wasn't adding up, but he had no proof to back it up. He was broken from his thoughts when he laid eyes on 2 beautiful books laying on the desk. Sensei, cried Kakashi with tears rolling down his cheeks. Did Jiraiya-sama give you those new editions? Yeah, said Minato, a little embarrassed by the man's eccentric antics. He didn't give you them already? I thought you're always the first to receive them. Kakashi shook his head with a frown marring his masked face. I just got back to the village yesterday after that 3-month-long recon mission, so I haven't been caught up with the Makeout Paradise novels. His visible eye twinkled as he stared at his teacher. Jiraiya-sama told me he had given you a present that I would like. I guess that's what he meant. Do you mind if I take them? The Hokage backed up a little, feeling weirded out by the man's crazed look. A part of him didn't care if he took those books, but another part of him didn't want to give up a cuckold's diary. He hadn't read it in the past 2 days and he was unfortunately craving to read more. Thankfully he didn't have to explain why he didn't want to hand that book over since he had placed it in his desk drawer. Sure, Kakashi. Thanks, sensei, chirped the perverted Cyclops as he leapt forward and took the books into his arms like a lost lover. Have a good day. Minato sighed as the man vanished in a swirl of leaves. Deciding to unwind a little, he paid a quick glance around him to make sure no one was watching him. Feeling content, he opened his desk drawer and got out the book that's been on his mind for the past 2 days. She laid there on our matrimonial bed looking frail and weak. Gallons of semen were oozing out of the sacred area that created the life of our 2 lovable children. She stared at me with half-lidded eyes. I found myself wondering if she even knew who I was anymore. I wanted to hold her. I wanted to make sure she understood that we will never talk about this again. I would do my best to move on from this tragedy. Amy-chan wants you to pick your kids up from school and take them to their grandparents. You are to stay there as well. I trembled as the man we brought into our bedroom was once again going balls deep inside my completely exhausted wife. I wanted to yell, wanted to punch him, but I knew he was stronger than me. I understand that we had an agreement, but I've been persuaded to breed your wife. Now take the kids because Amy-chan and I will be busy all week. You will get her back on Monday. Each of his words struck my heart and I was once again bawling my eyes out. It was like my very soul was being ripped out from my body. Breeding. That was forbidden on all accounts. We had strictly set up the terms and conditions that Ruto would use the birth control jutsu on my wife to ensure she doesn't get knocked up. Minato was coming down with a cold sweat. So much emotion had been poured into this book that he could feel the protagonist's heartache through just his words. It gave him a heart attack just picturing himself in the protagonist's position. Imagining Kushina rolling in the sheets with another man made his eyes well with tears. Would she act similarly if a bigger-ed man became intimate with her? The poor fool had no idea what was going on behind his back. He had no idea that his son stole his wife from under his nose and that he would never get her back. Wiping down his face with a napkin, he took deep breaths to calm his racing heart. He knew he was being foolish for reading such a graphic novel, but it had become like a drug to him and he was slowly becoming addicted. But I thought we. Please don't argue. I turned my head upon hearing my wife's voice. My heart crumbled as I saw her gazing at me while stroking her lover's terrifyingly huge. I want Ruto-sama to keep making love to me. Besides, a blush crept up to her rosy cheeks as she looked away. I want to bear Ruto-sama's children. I felt my life flash before my eyes. Making love. I thought we were the ones who made love. I was so gentle with her, never attempting to hurt her during our nights of passion. The man before me did not make love to my wife. He had ed the living shit out of her, and she was calling it lovemaking. To make matters worse, she wants to get impregnated by him. Please leave us, said the man my wife was cheating on me with. I knew that tone. He wasn't asking me to leave, he was ordering me to. I gathered up the courage to glare at him, but he simply smirked before looking at my wife. Me off. Any confidence I had conjured was ripped out from under me. My wife was not a fan of giving blowjobs, yet here she was doing it so eagerly for another man. I crawled out of my room with tears rolling down my cheeks. This happened all because of my deranged fantasy of seeing my wife with someone else. Had I known how huge his was, I would have never offered Amy to him. I should have kept my mouth shut. As a broken man, I took my first few steps outside and cringed at the bright light shining down on me from the golden sun above. All around me are familiar faces. Worn out places, worn out faces. Bright and early for their daily races. Going nowhere, going nowhere. Their tears are filling up their glasses. No expression, no expression. From a responsible homeowner, I was made into a cuckold. I would be spending the next 3 days at my parents' house with my kids. They would obviously ask why my wife didn't tag along, but I couldn't tell them that she was getting ed by a man far superior to me. Worst of all, Amy would be pregnant by the time I would be invited back inside my home. Now that I was in a mad world, I could relate to the lyrics of that song. Hide my head, I want to drown my sorrow. No tomorrow, no tomorrow. Jiraiya had exaggerated the truth in this book since Naruto ultimately decided against impregnating the man's wife, but Minato didn't know that. Dropping the novel on his desk, the Hokage ran straight to the bathroom and began splashing cold water on his face. He stared into the mirror, watching the water dripping down his flushed face and mixing with the tears leaking from his eyes. His heart was pounding hard into his chest. This was the first time he was reading such graphic content, and he was facing a great deal of trouble stomaching it. Even though this was fiction, it felt real to him. His wife with another man, the thought was making his head spin. Unfortunately, the book was so well written that it was difficult to not be engrossed with the read. A muscular man like his son had a figure that matched the character Ruto who had stolen the protagonist's wife. Come to think of it, even their names matched. Still, this was one of the most disturbing things he had ever read. But then, why were his pants so tight? His eyes slowly grew wide in horror upon realizing that he was pitching a baby tent. XXX. Kami. It's so beautiful, Narukoi. I'm glad you like it, Miko Haim. Here, give me your hand. Makoto Uchiha wiped her watery eyes, smiling gorgeously at the footage of her lover presenting her with a diamond ring for their 3-year anniversary. Fugaku had given her his blessings to ditch their wedding ring and replace it with the one Naruto was giving her. In fact, Fugaku was so supportive that he personally offered to videotape this momentous occasion. There wasn't much for her to do these past few days. She would either train, spend time with her family, or run a few errands here and there to show others that she was alive and well. Naruto had spoiled her so much these past 5 years that it was difficult for her to adjust to not having him by her bedside. Earlier today she stepped out to hang out with her friends. Yoshino Nara had hosted this week's get-together in a new cafe that recently opened its doors a few blocks away from the Akamiki barbecue restaurant. All the ladies had asked about Kushina's second week of being a no-show and she had to come up with a bullshit excuse. She couldn't exactly tell them that her best friend was cheating on the Hokage with Naruto. Hell, she hadn't informed any of them of her affair, nor did she reveal that Naruto was now the true Uchiha clan head. After that eventful brunch, she made her way back to the compound to find something to pass her time. Watching her favorite moments with her lover seemed like a no-brainer. Bringing her hand to her face, she gently kissed the top of her ring and gazed at it fondly. This single piece of jewelry was worth at least 30 times more than the ring Fugaku had given her. How Naruto was able to afford it was beyond her, but it was so expensive that even the fire daimyo's wife had fainted when she laid eyes on it. In the end, it wasn't even the value of the ring that made it dear to her heart. Her soulmate had put this ring on her finger, thus making it more precious than mountains of gold. So, how about some anniversary? Naru-kui, let's go get some dessert first. A melodious giggle escaped her to hear herself adorably complaining to Naruto. The blonde himself looked amused on screen and was shaking his head in mirth. She was observing her 2-year younger self stealing gazes at Naruto when he wasn't looking. Now that she thought about it, she still does that to this day. Just 2 weeks ago, she was shamelessly eyeing him like a piece of meat when they were showering together. His hair was wet, drops of water were rolling off his chiseled chest. His wet monster was jutting up proudly towards her like it knew where it belonged. You can bet that she jumped his Boney's T-split. As the footage kept rolling, those moments on screen kept coming to her in a flashback. She could remember jumping around like an excited little girl when he told her that he was taking her on a trip around the elemental nations for their anniversary. It was just him and her out there, alone and without a care in the world. No one could blame her because she was so head over heels in love with him. A fragile smile curled to her lips to see herself on screen, garbed in a beautiful velvet dress. I love you. I love you more. The scene cut to her face creeping closer to his, open-mouthed and ready to seal an affectionate kiss. Their lips finally meshed together in union. The camera picked up on her little whimper as she fell into the blonde's arms, which now cradled her with zeal. It also picked up on their gasps of rhapsody when their lips broke apart. His mouth flowed across her neck and jaw, eagerly coating the flesh with his boiling saliva. Her voluptuous frame paired with his muscular build was incredibly erotic to watch. Happy anniversary, Miko Heim. Happy anniversary, Naru Koi. The scene transitioned again, but now they were fully. Makoto remembered this scene perfectly. She and her lover had just gotten out of the jacuzzi. Alongside fingering her underwater, he used the water jets to bring her to an orgasm. Later in the evening, it started raining. But instead of staying indoors, they started having on the roof of the house they were renting. Since they were regularly in the shower, the rain crashing down on them didn't bother them in the slightest. Now, my lovable Naru Koi, let your Miko Heim take care of you. Now the television was displaying her caressing the entire length of Naruto's sculpted chest. She was taking her time in appreciating his godly physique, running her fingertips along his abdomen, thighs. The camera was picking up on the blonde's groans as she dragged the tip of her huge tits down his stomach. Her back smoothly bowed, elevating her big, fat high in the air for the camera to see. The crevice of her buttocks was on full display as she had her legs spread, revealing her cute little and the twitching pink folds of her vagina peeking out from between her matronly thighs. Me, Naru Koi, don't hold back. Break me. Makoto picked up the remote and switched off the television, her s stirring from arousal. What lied ahead was an animalistic, 20-hour-long marathon. Naruto had ed her so hard in that tape that she actually lost her voice from all the screaming she did. By the end of their demonic mating session, their rental home was in shambles. Beds, tables, windows, ceiling fans, lights, cups, glasses, plates, they broke every thing in sight. Just thinking about it made her auras emerge from its hood, her panties dampening as juices sparkled out of her burning cunt. She bit her succulent lips, finding it difficult to resist the urge to continue watching that footage. Not once in the 5 years she's been with Naruto did she have to masturbate. He had spoiled her to the point she could not longer feel pleasure from touching herself. This was the longest she's gone without him spending the night with her. Naruto rarely ever took on missions because he was loaded. His business ventures had taken him to new plateaus of wealth. She knew he didn't really care much for being a ninja. Of course, he kept himself in shape and trained like a beast, but he just didn't give two shits about the shinobi life. He was more interested in living a peaceful life and having more than a human being can imagine. Because he was so deeply in love with her, he decided to share everything with her. His hopes, dreams, likes, dislikes, he told her everything. Needless to say, she was hurt that he had initially her to gather more intel about his mother. Here she was deeply in love with him, only to hear his heart belong to someone else. Any explanations he gave were ignored by her. For the next few days, things were tense between them. That was the only time they had ever fought, though it was more of a misunderstanding than a fight. It wasn't until a few days later, on their first-year anniversary, did she receive the shock of her life when she saw her home decorated with roses, each rose with a note taped to its stem. Each note depicted what Naruto loved about her. Her smile, her face, her lips, her body. The way she walked, the way she talked, the way she kissed him, the way she danced. His compliments were so detailed that her eyes welled with tears. Pictures of them together were hung up on every wall of the compound. Her husband and sons weren't present, but she would later find out that Naruto had convinced them to make themselves scarce for the night. She made her way up the stairs where there laid an upward-pointing arrow on every step. The final arrow pointed to the master bedroom. As soon as she took those steps inside, her heart started hammering a loud, frantic heartbeat. Intimate candles littered the room with him standing in the center holding up a sign that read, "Happy Anniversary, my Miko Heim. I can spend an hour explaining myself, or you can search deep into my eyes for the answer you're looking for. Activate your Sharingan if you must. Tell me if my feelings for you aren't genuine. Tell me that I don't love you. Tell me that I don't want you to one day become the mother of my child." She could vividly remember barreling towards him and crashing into his chest. There was no more hurt, just an overwhelming surge of love that was breaking down. She could sense no deceit coming from him. Of course, she knew he was telling the truth all along. Her reaction when he spilled his secrets was garnered from the thought that she would one day be neglected by him for Kushina. She had never doubted his love for her. There was no one on this planet who loved her more than Naruto, no one. Snapping back to reality, Makoto got out of bed and began pacing around with her angelic face scrunching up in concentration. 5 days have passed since Naruto began in Kushina. So far, she's only seen him for an hour or two every night. They would share 1 or 2 rounds of, after which he would tuck her into bed and watch her drift asleep before going back to his home to pleasure Kushina. A frown marred her gorgeous features as she thought about Naruto holding Kushina dearer to his heart than he held her. He's told her on countless occasions that he will never neglect her, but the heart is fickle, and it only takes a second for it to break. Shaking her head, she pushed back those dark thoughts and tried focusing on the positive. Suddenly, her eyes lit up as she was engulfed by a pair of strong, muscular arms. A soft smile curled to her lips when she felt his fingers gently rubbing her stomach. "Narukoi," whispered the mother, barely able to contain her emotions. "Why are you here? I thought you'd be with Kushina-chan." She was upset, and it showed through her voice. "I felt your sadness emitting from the ring, said Naruto as he kissed the creamy skin of his girlfriend's neck. The ring he had gifted Makoto was special because he had sheltered it with fuinjutsu. One seal he had placed allowed him to sense her emotions to inform him if she was depressed. This was done with her consent. He had more sense than to invade her privacy like that. Makoto nodded along, having momentarily forgotten about her ring's many useful properties. And no, Kaheim just took a small nap, so I showered and came to check up on you. Turning her around, he took her face in his hands. I'm sorry for not giving you enough time these past few days, but Kaheim and I are still in the early stage of our relationship. Do you remember how we used to be? A soft giggle escaped her. We used to for days without breaks. I can remember you not letting me leave our room for 3 days straight. She scrunched up her face, cutely puffing out her cheeks like a squirrel. You were a real horny boy back then. And you weren't a queen? Queried the blonde, earning a blush in response. Again, I apologize for not being able to handle this all that well. Now wait just a second, Narukoi, interrupted the MILF. You aren't at fault here. Haven't we already discussed this? Naruto nodded. We have, but it really hurts me to see you in pain, Miko Haim. I just want to find a way to make you both okay with this and not make you feel so hurt. This isn't a nonsensical harem fic where you can bed multiple women you've just met in a single chapter, Koi. That one-directional female characterization is bullshit, chided Makoto with a sly smirk. You are dealing with actual women here. The only reason why I'm fine with you dating your mother is because of how genuine your feelings are towards both of us. You are putting in the effort of checking up on me every night. How can I be fed up with you? Sure, I'm lonely without you and miss your company around the house, but I know I have to observe a little more patience. Brushing his lips against his best friend's mother's, he wrapped his arms around her and held her tightly, not wanting to let her go, not that she would have let him. Big, juicy butt cheeks ballooned out on his thighs as Makoto grinded her wide hips on the blonde's crotch. She toyed with his hair, making a game out of messing with his spikes. She giggled into his mouth as he shot her a playful glare. They leaned back, locking lips, embracing like a match made in heaven. I love you, Miko Haim, whispered Naruto as he ruffled up his woman's hair. I promise I'll make it up to you once I've cemented my relationship with Kaheim. I love you more, Narukoi. Oh, and you also have to make a cuckold out of your father, reminded Makoto. When will you put that second plan into action, by the way? Naruto grinned foxily at his lover. It's already set in motion. Jiraiya-sensei just handed San the Makeout Paradise books. One of them is a cuckold's diary. With him routinely appearing inside the office via invisibility cloak, it will be easy for him to implement the next steps of the plan. Makoto matched her lover's expression with a sultry grin of her own. Part of the reason why she loved him unconditionally was because he never kept things from her. If he was happy, he'd share his happiness with her. If he was depressed, he'd share his depression with her. Likewise, she didn't hesitate to pour her heart out to him. He had grown up to become a man who she admired, loved, and worshipped with all her mind, body, and soul. She loved no one the way she loved Naruto. Every part of this plan was glossed over in detail with her. He had told her that Kakashi was going to arrive soon. This classified information was given to him by Itachi, whose position as Hokage's bodyguard was helpful in this regard. The plan of involving the unsuspecting copy ninja was not going to be easy to implement. However, when it came down to the Makeout Paradise novels, the lazy bastard was easier to manipulate than a brain-dead piece of shit side character. So, how long are you here to stay? Asked Makoto with a flush creeping up to her cheeks. How does us ing each other silly while watching our 3-year anniversary tape sound? Naruto's eyes flashed with unrestrained lust. It sounds like you're wearing far too much clothes right now. Without warning, the blonde leapt at his lover and she let out a schoolgirlish squeal. For the next 2.5 hours, all that could be heard was the sound of masculine grunts and feminine cries. Downstairs in the living room, Fugaku and his two sons smiled at one another. Their matriarch was with her lover again, meaning she would greet them in a couple of hours with a gorgeous UAL afterglow. Getting out of his chair, Fugaku made his way to the kitchen to fix up some grub for his wife. She usually felt famished after engaging in a couple rounds of with Naruto. XXX. Smile at the camera, Ka-Heim. Kushina's eyes slanted slightly as she graced her son with her most gorgeous smile, though it wasn't remotely noticeable because her cheeks were puffed out to ridiculous levels. Then again, it was a daunting task to curl her lips when her mouth was full of. 6 days have passed since Naruto enacted the plan to kick his father out of the house. Out of those 6 days, the past 3 have been spent primarily on training his mother's getting her to adjust to a bigger butt plug each day. The floor, the kitchen, the laundry room, the shower, the bed, the living room, the stairs, there wasn't a room in their house where Naruto hadn't ed Kushina. She was no longer wearing a bra or panties, but she still had on her garter belt, stockings and high heels. He refused to let her take those off. Now the mother and son were filming their first tape, but they currently weren't at home. Naruto and Kushina had teleported to the Hokage's office via Shunshin no Jutsu. Since Minato had to relocate to the Anbu headquarters and Naruto had orchestrated the whole thing, he pretty much had full control over the renovations going on inside the office. The construction workers had left a few hours ago, so this was the perfect place for him to film the first scene of their incestuous tape. Of course, this was Naruto's idea. Kushina was a little camera shy, but that had nothing to do with why she was unsure about being videotaped. She was just concerned that her husband might get his hands on the footage. After her son reassured her that Minato would not able to do a damn thing about their coupling, she relented and agreed to shoot the tape. However, this only added 2 new questions to the pile of questions she wanted to ask him at a later date. The footage began with her dancing for him while he sat in the Hokage's chair, watching her like a hawk. He had unsealed a portable music player and turned on a fast track to get her to kick things up a notch. After the prologue of their tape was complete, he instructed her to play with her butt plug while he filmed her. She was blushing the entire time as he shot her from different angles. He proceeded to hand her the camera so she could film him eating out her like a starved animal. Now she was giving him a blowjob. My Ka-Heim is such a naughty girl for ing off her son like this, cooed Naruto while sitting in his father's work chair. What will Tu-san think? The MILF's reply was releasing her son's gigantic, panting as bands of her spit and his precum connecting her mouth and his broke and fell onto her chin. She kept her mouth open, allowing the juices to dribble out and ooze down his shaft. Gathering all the saliva she could collect, she proceeded to pour a steady stream of her scalding saliva across his appendage. The sight was marvelous to watch, especially through the viewfinder that Naruto was looking out of. Do you think I give a about what my husband thinks? Retorted Kushina with a twinkle in her eye, a twinkle that many used to fear across the elemental nations. The last piece to her confidence was retrieved and Naruto was now bearing witness to the rebirth of the red-hot habanero. It was hypnotizing to record his mother's head swaying up and down, applying several coats of spit on his shaft. Once his was nice and wet, she made a lunge and engulfed his head into her famished mouth. Her cheeks parted as far as humanly possible to adjust to getting her oral caverns stretched out. Inch by inch, his length slowly vanished inside her. However, she was sent into a coughing fit while trying to accommodate the 11th inch of his shaft. Ed Kushina, her sensual humming merging with slurps and wet sounds to produce one hot, harmonious blowjob. Removing her hands from her son's thick, cervix-killing shaft, she rested them beside his groin, then groped his lower abdomen, sinking her fingernails into his toned flesh. Chakra was being summoned from the center of her lungs all the way up to her throat. It was then a change occurred in her movement. First, her cheeks puffed out as she tried sinking her face lower, trying to engulf more of him into her mouth. Unable to do so, she pulled herself up before slamming back down. Perhaps it was the camera giving her the motivation she needed, or it was her personal goal to pleasure him, but she made a final lunge. Naruto's animalistic growls filled the office when he felt his mother's lips wrapping tightly around the base of his shaft, her nose pressing against his groin. It finally happened. She had finally deep-throated him. Her hands splayed out, fanning in mid-air as she relied totally on the movements of her neck and jaw. It took her 10 days of constant practice to accommodate every inch of his monster inside her mouth. There was a scorching desire from her throat to release him because the heat rolling off his shaft was burning her tongue. But she was not about to stop here. She had come too far to give up now. That's it, Kaheim. That! Exclaimed Naruto, a burning desire pumping through his veins, culminating in the furnace of lust between his muscular thighs. No more encouragement was needed. Violet orbs narrowed, her breathing labored. She began shaking her head back and forth, her tongue sliding around his. Knowing he had a clear view of her big, fat, she decided to up the ante by grinding the giant orbs of flesh in small circles. The fact he was recording her with a video camera made her want to double her efforts. Withdrawing almost 7 inches from her mouth, she slammed her head back down, once again taking all 14.5 inches of him inside her. With his Hokage's tower stuffed down her throat, she slid her tongue out and beginning his huge balls. The need for quenching her thirst was becoming unbearable. It was then she felt his right leg shaking and it made her become relentless in her efforts. She was giving it her all to summon his rich, thick jism from the deepest burrows of his testicles. Naruto stared down at his mother and saw her staring directly into the camera lens with her eyes flashing with lust. This wasn't the lonely housewife he had taken into his wing almost 2 weeks ago. No, this was a woman who was making most of her potential as a hot MILF. Her tongue was sliding against the bottom of his. Her plump lips were squeezing against his shaft, covering it with her hot, sticky drool, her saliva pooling around his huge balls. She was slobbering all over him off like her life depended on it. He wanted to last a bit longer, and he had a few tricks up his sleeves that could help him last for hours, but he decided to let his ejaculation come naturally. Personally, he was in favor of feeding her his hot, creamy semen. Reaching out and wrapping a hand in her thick, red hair, he started pulling and pushing her head, guiding it as she deep-throated him. The strap to the video camera was getting loose, but it was still felt snug around the palm of his hand. 5 minutes in, and he reared his head back. "I'm coming, Kaheim," announced the blonde with a deep, powerful voice, thrusting his hips wildly into his mother's face as he erupted into her mouth. She was grateful for being a kunoichi since she was able to sense the first thick stream of jism traveling up her son's god-sized shaft towards his mushroom head. Then again, this could have easily been written off as practice makes perfect. She was bound to become better at giving him a blowjob if she was ing him off a minimum of 3 times every day for the past 10 days. She pulled back, just as a thick rope of cream came bursting from his head and into her mouth. But that was just the first shot. He kept on shooting ropes upon ropes of jism, each burst hitting her directly in the tonsils. Working her throat muscles, she made sure to swallow as quickly as he shot another stream of his cum. She felt her stomach expanding by the time he was done releasing inside her. Relief washed over her as she came out unscathed. Thanked Kami for chakra because she didn't know how else she would have dealt with the overwhelming release. Murmured Kushina cutely, ing her lips as she drew out the very last shot of the rich protein drink her son had brewed for her with his ungodly huge. With a pop sound echoing through the Hokage's office, she withdrew her son from her mouth. She stared directly at the camera lens while opening her mouth wide, allowing him to videotape the puddle of cum on her tongue. Then she gulped down the jism and opened her mouth again, this time to confirm she had swallowed everything with no hassle. Lowering her head, she scoped out the crime scene a final time, using her tongue to make sure that nothing gets traced back to her. Naruto took deep, long breaths as his mother went down on him again. She wasn't ing him off, she just had her lips wrapped around his head, trying to summon out any remaining cum from his urethra. It was making his knees go weak. She pulled away with a trail of saliva connecting her lips to his oversized mushroom head. Releasing the camera from his grasp and placing it on the desk, he yanked her by the shoulders and scooped her up in his arms, and she didn't hesitate to snuggle with him. Two huge, juicy tits ballooned against his chest, a fan of long, red hair splaying over them like a blanket. His was still painfully hard, but now it found a home between the valley of the mountains on her chest. Violet met Cerulean as the incestuous couple made eye contact and wrapped their arms around each other. The two were now sitting in the Hokage's chair, basking in their intimacy. "That was one hell of a blowjob, Kaheim," whispered Naruto as he planted a gentle kiss on his parent's forehead. "Deep-throating me is by no means a small feat, but not once did you skimp out on your training. You've improved leaps and bounds since when you first took me in your mouth." Kushina's lips curled into a big, childish grin, beaming and flushing at the praise. She has come a long way and she felt proud of herself. Thanks to him, she had regained her confidence and was now comfortable with speaking openly about what she preferred and what style of she was in the mood for. However, her son was still able to embarrass her with his naughty talk and she honestly never wanted that to change. She loved how he was able to excite such reactions out of her. Minato was never able to make her feel this way. With a racing heart, the woman pecked her son's cheek. "Thank you, Sochikoi. I'm really happy that you enjoyed it." Nodding fondly at his lover, the blonde slowly unwrapped himself from their embrace. "Want to go home now?" "Hi," chirped the MILF. "Let's go home." Getting out of the chair, Naruto summoned a shadow clone to clean whatever mess he and his mother may have made in the office. The construction workers would back tomorrow, and he didn't want any of them to get suspicious to see dried up fluids on the floor. Grabbing the camera and his mother, the two vanished via Shunshin no Jutsu and reappeared inside the master bedroom of their home. Informing his mother to take a seat on the bed, the whiskered adult walked over to the corner of their room where stood a tripod stand. He brought the stand over to the foot of the bed and attached his camera on top of it. The back of the camera was now facing the dresser, and its reflection could be seen through the mirror. Hitting the record button, he resumed the videotaping of their session. "Are you ready to take it up the Kaheim?" asked Naruto, his eyes twinkling with lust as he helped his mother off the bed. "Hi," stammered Kushina with a cute blush burning her gorgeous features. Despite agreeing to let her son take her anal virginity, her feet squirmed, her back felt uncomfortable from her own tensing. She tried to relax, but she was extremely nervous and scared. However, this was her way of getting him to forget about her best friend, so she could not afford to back down now. Once his mother's back was facing the dresser, he brought his hands to her large, round buttocks and spread them for the camera. The contents that laid between her deep crack were now being investigated by the lens, though the butt plug lunged within her anal cavity prevented the camera from fully capturing her puckered rosebud. Edging a finger on either side of the plug, he pulled gently, ballooning the skin around her back door. A pop sound was heard as he yanked the item out of her. Kushina ed as her gaping sphincter gradually retracted. That butt plug was 2 inches long and was wide enough to make it uncomfortable for her to sit down on a firm surface. Before she knew it, her son nudged her shoulder and she turned her head to see him holding up 3 bottles in his hand. "This is anal lubricant," said Naruto. "You have 3 flavors to choose from: peach, grape, and blueberry." The room was met with booming laughter as Naruto couldn't help but cackle at the sight of his mother taking her atomic red face in her hands. The mention of blueberry flavor lubricant must have made her recall the blueberries he had shoved up her. Despite her growing confidence in the bedroom, she was still shy around him, and he loved her from the bottom of his heart for that. He never wanted his adorable mother to change. She may be the red-hot habanero, but he loved Kushina Uzumaki more. "Blueberry it is then." Chewing on her bottom lip, the MILF could do nothing but allow her son to lay her across his lap. He instructed her to spread her butt cheeks, and she didn't hesitate to obey his commands. Unlike the oil lubricant he had applied on Makoto prior to popping her anal cherry, this lubricant was more of a jelly-like substance. Tremors ran through the Uzumaki matriarch as her son poured the jelly right on her puckered anal ring, the access between her cheeks easy due to her spreading her bottom. Holding the bottle in one hand, he brought the other around her and wedged it between her breathtaking derriere. He began working her anal muscles by drilling 2 fingers in and out of her. Wet, squishy noises chimed in with her tantalizing S as the jelly dribbled out of her each time he rocked his palms forward. He didn't stop until he was sure that he had spread the lubricant all around the tight sides inside her anus. Content with the sight of her spasming legs, he went back to squeezing on the bottle, filling her with lubricant until it bubbled out of her. With lust-filled eyes, he watched the jelly trickle ran down her perineum until it was cruising between the rich, pink folds of her cunt. He finished things off by applying the jelly on his crotch, lathering it over every inch of his monster. "Okay, we should be good to go," said Naruto while capping the bottle. "We're going to start things off with a seated variant of the reverse cowgirl position. I'm going to sit on the edge of the bed and I want you to stand between my legs with your back facing me." Kushina nodded along as she got out of her son's lap and watched as he parted his legs, allowing her to slide in between them. Since this location was close to the dresser, they could see themselves on the mirror attached to the furniture. Taking a deep breath, she stared at her reflection while taking 2 handfuls of her gorgeous bubble butt and spreading them wide for him. The small puckered hole of her rectum had shrunk since there was no more butt plug keeping her folds stretched apart. Her heart raced as she felt his enormous head resting against her exquisite opening. Time revolved slowly for her when he grabbed her by the sides and pulled her down on his monster. She gritted her teeth as he pushed forward, but she was clenching her so hard that he couldn't penetrate her. He pushed her down a second time, this time locking his head into her anus with one strong thrust. The bedroom shook with a deafening feminine wail. "Arg hhhhhh." Kushina dropped her head with tears welling in her eyes bulging to the size of dinner plates. Her body tensed, unconsciously trying to repel the gigantic intruder but to no avail. This pain was far worse than when her son was shoving his up her tight little. The little cavity of her anal chambers was now being stretched ridiculously far and wide. That butt plug was decent sized, but her son's monster was at least 2 times thicker and it felt like he was tearing her apart. Naruto wanted to bellow out his love for his mother's. Her interior was warm and cozy, just like her sweet. However, the extremely tight walls were arguing with his, trying to crush it before he got a chance to delve deeper. No matter how much discomfort he was in, she needed time to adjust to the girth of his flowing into her lavish, so he dared not move until she gave him the say-so. The sounds of her whimpers reached his ears and he paid a quick glance at the mirror to see her eyes sealed shut, brows crinkled with tears straining her pretty face. He felt terrible for being the cause of her distress, but there was nothing he could do aside from channeling medicinal chakra to heal and strengthen the inner walls of her rectum. Thankfully, the jelly lubricant was also acting as a protective film. It took another 5 minutes, but his mother gradually relaxed her hips. Unfortunately, by doing so she accidentally took an extra inch of his shaft up her butt. Thick, creamy nectar came gushing from the depths of her cunt. Since her son wasn't vaginally penetrating her, she was easily able to squirt all over her legs, their feet, the floor, and even the legs of the tripod stand. Due to that massive orgasm, her nether region was super sensitive. Then, her son shoved another inch up her rectum. "Fuick," shrieked Kushina at the top of her lungs. "You're breaking me, Sochikoi." Hearing and seeing his mother in pain was of course unbearable for him. However, it was hard not to be aroused by the sight and feel of her puckered hole getting stretched by his one-eyed beast. For the next couple of minutes, he didn't budge an inch from his position, nor did he allow her to move. He began massaging her doughy cheeks, trying to soothe her discomfort away. To the surprise of Minato's wife, the pain started to subside, and she was left with an overwhelming feeling of fullness up her with just a dull ache from the stretched sphincter. Her eyes glossed as her son's hands gripped her hips more firmly. Throwing her head back, his monster traveled through her prolonged scream as he buried another 2 inches up her anal walls. Little by little, the blonde fed his mother his ungodly large. Every inch of him that her welcomed inside caused her mouth to open wider and wider, mirroring the actions of her. How much more? Queried Kushina, her throat sore from all the screaming. Her head was throbbing in pain as she had a massive headache. It wasn't even like her son was penetrating her. It was like he was trying to dig through her rectum and come out of her mouth. You're just about halfway there, gritted out Naruto as he rocked his hips, driving further into his mother's backdoor entrance. Okay, it's less than that now. Kushina sobbed in both pleasure and pain, but the medicinal chakra flowing through her was sheltering her from any physical damage. It was mind-boggling how huge her son's was. He was doing her in but she could feel him in her womb. She was grateful for the training he had given her with those butt plugs and by exploring her with his tongue and fingers. Had he not paid so much attention to her then, there was no telling what would be happening to her right now. Exhaling a shuddering breath, Naruto tightened his grip on his mother's sides. Lean back into me and brace yourself, Kaheim. I'm going to shove the rest in one fluent motion. Minato's wife weakly followed her son's instruction. Naruto drove home, his huge balls banging against the pink folds of his mother's cunt as all 14.5 inches of his monster was embedded up her anal passage, surrounded and gripped like a vice by her inner walls. Her big, fat kissed his hot groin as he was all the way up inside her scrumptious berry to the hilt inside her tightest hole. Kushina's jaw was dropped, but aside from loud, guttural cries, words seemed to have died down her throat. Her eyes were rolled to the back of her head. Strands of long, sweaty crimson tresses were matted to her cheeks. Her hands fanned out in the air, her forearms vibrating with such force that even her fingers started shaking. She was gyrating like on her son's lap due to how powerful the spasms in her legs were getting. The inner walls of her were collapsing around his. A mere minute in, and the Uzumaki matriarch started babbling incoherently. C-CQM-CCUMin. Tidal waves of juices came gushing out of her, dancing artfully into the air for just a moment before raining down on the floor. Some of these bursts were creating such powerful splashes that a majority of her juices could be seen bouncing off the marble. The intensity of her gyrations now reached a point where her legs were now hoisted up in the air, her feet kicking side to side, left to right, with her toenails twitching. She would have toppled over had he not wrapped his arms around her stomach. Their thighs, calves, feet were all caked with her feminine cream. Even his huge balls were glistening with her juices. So outrageous was her orgasm, coupled with the sensation of her son's monster pushing her to its absolute limits, that she was forced to pass out. Naruto let out a breath he didn't know he had as his mother's titanic orgasm finally washed away. She fell limp against him and he could tell she temporarily blacked out. He didn't blame her, that was one hot orgasm. A wild rush of excitement coursed through him, knowing all of this was being videotaped. He would definitely be watching a rerun of this later tonight with her. Kushina awoke with a thunderous gasp, her huge tits swinging up and down due to her erratic breathing. Her vision was compromised since she was seeing two of everything as her anal ring pulsed around her son's shaft. For 2 minutes she just sat her on son's giant shaft, her eyes fluttering. Do you feel it, Kaheim? Cooed Naruto huskily as he leaned into his mother's ear. Do you feel my in your ass? I feel you trying to tear through it, answered the redhead. There was no humor in her statement at all. She could genuinely feel her son's massive weapon lodged up where no mortal man should be able to reach. It'll get better, was all Naruto said in response before he went about rolling his hips, allowing his mother to grind on him. The movement was slow-paced, but it met its purpose of relaxing her muscles and getting her used to the sensation of his upper. They were now writhing in a slow, steady rhythm. Since his arms were wrapped around her stomach, it was effortless for him to tilt his hand and press her swollen orus with his thumb. She jerked her hips, causing his to flex within her. Rubbing her in circles, he used his free hand to take her left in between two fingers. A low, guttural plea escaped Minato's wife as she came a second time. This one wasn't as monumental as the first, but it was still noteworthy. However, before she could drink in the euphoria, her son withdrew 6 inches of his from her before shoving every inch back inside her in one fell swoop. The air was forced out of her lungs as her world came to a stop from that one, earth-shattering thrust. Her eyes bugged out, a gathering of saliva shooting out of her wide-open mouth. "You're breaking my dattebane. Wrong," corrected Naruto with a deep, powerful voice. "I'm making love to your Kaheim. It's still too tight for my, so I wanted to stretch it out a little more." No matter how badly she wanted to refute his claims, she found herself agreeing that he was making love to her. Anal was supposed to be a dirty kink that not many couples indulge in. It wasn't supposed to be romantic, yet right now that's the only word she could use to describe it. His rhythm was gentle as he ally pampered her, treating her like a princess. A nurturing rocking motion was being delivered by his hips, embracing hers as she wiggled them. First, he ran his hands along her matronly thighs, massaging them. Then he slid his hands up her sides and rubbed her tummy. Her heaving chest was next on the menu as he took 2 handfuls of the glorious weapons on her chest and deactivated their security alarm by kneading them with a finesse that only he had. Violet orbs glossed, a shiver running down her spine when he nipped the creamy skin of her neck. The cramping of her legs was no longer an issue since his touch was melting away all her discomfort. Bringing one of his hands to her face, she nuzzled it with her cheek before kissing all 5 of his fingers. She cranked an arm around his neck and crashed his lips with her own famished lips. He used to be her baby boy, her little Naru-chan, the adorable troublemaker who used to prank people to show that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Now he was the man who she was cheating on her husband with. He was the man who she had given her anal virginity to. It was by coupling with him that she understood what it truly felt like to be in love with a man. She began rolling her hips, fully invested in helping him enjoy his stay inside her and hopefully apply for permanent residency. There was no one in the universe who she loved more than her son. Within the next 20 minutes, the sounds of their bodies slapping together filled the room as Kushina began bouncing up and down on the blonde's monster. Casting his gaze at the mirror, Naruto saw his mother staring at his reflection. A thin sheen of perspiration was all over her body, making her glow like the goddess he knew she was. Tears were rolling down her cheeks from getting her explored by such a big, fat, but there was a wild, hungry look in her eyes. She was getting into this, and he was damn sure not going to disappoint. Rocking his hips, Naruto met his mother's bucking hips. "Tell me, Kaheim, how does it feel to have your son digging deep into your ass?" "I never thought it could feel so good," cried out Kushina. "Oh, Sochikoi, I'm gonna come again." That was all the encouragement Naruto needed. Placing his strong, muscular arms around his mother's sides, he brought a hand down and shoved 2 fingers up her neglected. The beautiful pink folds eagerly dragged him inside since it's been a couple of hours since he last exercised her vaginal muscles. Squishy noises resulting from him fingering his mother's snatch chimed in on the noises her greedy was making as it desperately tried to hold him inside forever. Leaning into her ear, he mentioned in graphic detail how hard he was going to her in the she loved a little dirty talk, and he found that during the first time they had. This wasn't enough to break her rhythm, but it was enough to throw her over the edge. His huge balls slapped against her, their mattress springs creaking noisily as the red-hot habanero rode his gigantic. Each thrust resulted in her head thrashing about, her hair tossing from side to side like crazed whore. "Come in g," screamed Kushina to the heavens, thanking Kami-sama for blessing her with this god of a man. Violent waves of sweet cream gushed from the depths of her cunt, drenching his fingers as she shook on top of him. While Kushina was on her UAL high, Naruto lifted her by her sides while withdrawing his monster from her and his fingers from her. She was still squirting, so his entire lower half got drenched by her. He slammed her back down, but with such a powerful thrust that she instantly jumped off him with an outrageously loud screech and collapsed to the ground. Her big, fat ballooned out on the floor as she flopped around in a river of her own juices. She was quaking like she was at the mercy of an unsuspecting earthquake. Scooping his flailing mother up in his arms, Naruto kissed her on the forehead. He quickly ran a medical check on her and confirmed that he hadn't damaged her internal organs. The reason why she had reacted so strongly was because her nether region was still super sensitive from her latest orgasm. That really hurt, Databane, complained Kushina in a pouty voice, crossing her arms and huffing at her son. How was he supposed to feel sorry for his mother when she's putting on such an adorable act? Sometimes, he wished he didn't have such a soft spot in his heart for MILFs and married women. Chuckling at the spoiled princess that his mother was, he ran a hand through her luscious hair. I apologize for that, Kahime, whispered the blonde. How do you want me to make it up to you? Kushina winced as she wiggled her commodious hips, her numb butthole tingling. Suddenly, she thought back to how hard her son had ed her best friend in the but Makoto was somehow able to survive the brutal anal pounding. If that woman saw her like this, she would flash her that arrogant, condescending, trademark Uchiha smirk for not being able to handle anal with Naruto. She could imagine the woman telling her to back off and hand the blonde over to her. A fire ignited her violet orbs. There was no way she was going to admit defeat. She would stalk her claim on her son here and now and forever. Me, said Kushina while staring deep into her son's eyes. We've made love, but now I want you to give it to me hard and rough. Naruto narrowed his eyes, a dark hunger stirring from deep within him. Are you sure? I'm sure, replied Minato's wife seriously, no longer speaking as Kushina Uzumaki, but as the red-hot habanero. Give me your best, Sochikoi. I can take it. XXX. She couldn't take it. The number one rule to follow was to not challenge Naruto Uzumaki. 2 years ago, Makoto Uchiha found this out the hard way when she gloated to him about her incredible stamina and that being an Uchiha was how she was able to handle him. All that smug attitude evaporated from her features when Naruto cuffed her ankles and wrists before unleashing all hell on her. She realized that their previous hardcore sessions were vanilla in his book. The extreme, brutal, demonic ing he gave her that night ended with her assuming the fetal position. It was now Kushina Uzumaki's turn to be humbled. The start was delightful for her, since Naruto was banging her in her favorite position, cowgirl. It was exciting to be in this position since it was allowing the video camera to record her son's monster appearing and disappearing inside her gorgeous bubble butt. Of course, it was exhilarating because he would massage her huge bouncing tits or her while she worked her childbearing hips. Once the rhythm picked up, she started struggling with the vigorous thrusts being made into her anus, but she persevered through until she matched him thrust for thrust and began riding him like a true MILF. Then, he pushed his knees up and began savagely jackhammering into her. She never felt such searing pain and pleasure in her life. He was destroying her, yet it was jerking around him, trying to milk him for his seed. Not once did he orgasm, but she repeatedly came like bad news. Doggy style was next on the menu. The two symmetrical spheres of her bottom matched the color of her hair as her son bent her over and rammed her relentlessly from behind. He didn't even bother starting slow and then working his way up. No, this time he initiated the round with a painfully hard thrust and then kept them coming and kept her coming. Her tongue was hanging out of her mouth as she began panting like a tired dog, matching the true intent of this position. Her hair was flying about in various directions as her head was jerked up, her misty eyes staring blankly up at the ceiling.